Hello, I'm coming at you from my very messy room/studio a couple of weeks after I recorded this podcast. Just to clarify something, this is the first interview podcast I've done for this series, and I fluffed the introduction to a guy who I've been friends with for over 20 years because I got too lazy. I thought I could do it myself and I couldn't. So I just wanted to do that again. So I'm going to introduce our guest before we start the podcast. His name is Jack Bevan. He's a founder member of the band Foals from Oxford, UK, where I'm from. They are 6 studio albums they have released, including a double album, 3-time Mercury nominee, Ivor Novello nominee, 5-time Enemy Award winner, Brit Award winner. They've supported Paramore, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and more on tour. They've done huge spots at Glastonbury. They've headlined Reading and Leeds. They've done every festival out there. They've toured the entire world. And they're a fantastic band. Jack has been the drummer since the very beginning. He's a serious guy, and he's also one of the nicest, loveliest people I've ever met. And he maintains a good friendship with me to this day. And I just wanted to give him the introduction he deserved, because the one that I recorded, I stumbled over it, I fluffed it, I paused, I hesitated. It wasn't good. So I've cut that out of the main recording, and this is the response. Please enjoy the podcast. It's a fun interview. Please subscribe and like the show and share it. We're going to have loads of great guests on. Enjoy the interview with Jack. Thank you so much. Welcome. Strap on your instrument and jump in the back of your parents' car, because this is the My Mum Was Our Roadie podcast with me, Alex Camp, and we're going to be talking about bands in your teens and 20s and the village halls and the ambulances and the pumped stomachs and the just the crazy antics that went down in the early 2000s and beyond and elsewise. And today, for the first episode of the show, we've got a very special guest. The drummer of the band Foals, multi-platinum selling band from Oxford, 6 studio albums. Does that sound about right?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Welcome to the show. It's Jack Bevan.
Cheers.
How are you, sir?
I'm good, actually. Yeah, I'm very good. I'm off tour, got a bit of a break at the moment, and today was one of those mornings where I woke up and was like, I'm going to message a personal trainer. Do you ever have those mornings where you're just like, I saw a photo of a friend of mine who we might mention again later at some point, playing a gig topless, and I was just like, he's older than me and he looks amazing, and then I'm just like tucking into a box of Happy Hippos, you know, those Bueno things. And I'm just like, I need.
When you get the multi-pack of Happy Hippos, that's
it can only be
when
the
it starts to go downhill.
That's the thing. It's multi-packs for me now. It has to be a minimum multi-pack. So
it's not the 5-pack. It's the many of those 5-packs.
It's a 12-pack of 5-packs, and then I will have a 5-pack as a singular unit, essentially.
Where'd you go? The cash and carry? Did you go to like?
Yeah. I just fly over and go to Costco in the States. Yeah.
They've got them here. There's one in Manchester.
All right. Well, I'll be in Manchester soon then.
Mate, you got to come to Costco. I'm planning a trip. I don't have a card, but I'm gonna get one off somebody and call in a couple of favors. Get one of them big pizzas, nice. Hot dogs.
Perfect.
It's amazing time. I mean, we're the thing is, this leads in nicely because we're both at that age. We're 30. You're 38 as well, right?
Yeah.
So we grew up in came to our adulthood in the early 2000s, and just proper millennials, right in the sweet spot of millennial age. Yeah. I feel like just right there. So yeah, personal trainers are coming along. Just the guts. We've both got our hair. We're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I'm holding on. We'll see in 10 years where I'm at. But part of me, I feel like I kind of just want to just shave it all off and just preempt what might come down the line. Just get rid of it now, so that it's not a big shock in 10 years. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so you're just gonna shave it and then every now and then grow it out and see how it's getting on,
We'll see if
and
it
then just pull it
grows
back again.
Yeah.
I just watched watched a couple of random episodes of Breaking Bad last night,
Yeah.
including the one where he first shaves his head and then he goes and does the deal, and just starts becoming a badass. As soon as he shaves his head off, his hair, it's just
Yeah.
like it's over for the whole of New Mexico at that point. It's pretty amazing. So we're here to talk about music, and obviously you've had a very successful career now for probably it's about 20 years since you got signed with Foals. Is that right?
Yeah. 18 years.
2005 or 6?
2006.
2006.
Yeah.
Incredible. I remember it well. I remember seeing you in Brighton for the small portion that you lived in Brighton. I remember seeing you in the park early in the morning. I can't remember why. You were waiting. You were waiting to get picked up, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering.
Yeah.
It was near me at the level. I was like, "Hey, mate." It's like, "Hey, yeah, just got signed." That's how it goes in my head. I'm not sure if that really happened, but
Yeah. No. I remember that actually. Yeah.
do you remember? That's not a figment of my imagination.
No. I remember I was in the park and it was just before my 21st birthday, I think, and I'd had a really, really big party on the night before my 21st birthday. And I think I was going through some sort of existential crisis as I bumped into you on the levels. I think I'd literally popped out to buy something of sustenance to just keep me alive, and then I bumped into you at that point.
That's when I crop up. It's when you're having that existential crisis. I always just turn up in your periphery, whoever you are, not just you, anybody. They're just like, oh, there he is. Some sort of schizophrenic demon that just comes along to remind you that you're still alive. But I remember it well, and but we'd known each other for a long time before that. We went to school together. So when did we first meet? When we were 14? Would that be about right? 13, 14?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I feel like in lower school, in our middle school, I feel like that's when I kind of started to know or met you guys, because we weren't really in the same classes in lower school, I don't think. And
no, we didn't mix until this is when I think it was school trip to Belgium.
Oh yes.
We went to the war
that.
memorials and all that, and Ypres and all those places, and we started to become friends then.
Yeah.
And I brought with me Jimi Hendrix Greatest Hits and Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and I'm pretty sure I brought along a copy of Battle of Los Angeles by Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
They all got ruined, the CDs, because I spilt milk in my bag. I don't know how that happened, but some milk got loose. And that was on that trip, and I'm sure I remember hanging out with you a lot on that one. So we would have been about 14, I think. I think I
remember you playing me that Rage Against the Machine album for the first time on that trip, because I have only just now, having you said that, has reminded me of being on a coach listening to Battle of Los Angeles on a Discman. And that's a memory that has literally not been unlocked until 5 seconds ago, which is quite bad.
So I introduced you to Rage Against the Machine. That's a big... I'm very proud of that, if that's the case.
No, I think you did. I mean, to be honest, if you hadn't done it in person at that point, I think it would have you probably would have through Headroom at, a year later.
Yeah.
So it was coming from you either way, I think.
You would have gone to a Headroom gig and been like, that last song you did, that was way better than the others. Did you write that? I would have probably been like, yeah, that was me. Yeah, I did. Yeah, we did cover a lot of Rage Against the Machine songs over the years, mostly Killing in the Name, but it was the big highlight of the set. No wonder. And when we went on that trip, so 14, were you already playing drums at that point?
I can't remember if I'd started by that trip, but I did start when I was 14. I just remember thinking that there was no route in to any instrument, because I just didn't feel like I had any musical sort of ability. But drums, I had loads of energy, so I was like, well, I can beat the shit out of these, and it's burning off my energy as well. So this is great. And I got
no
a
notes,
teacher, no notes, nothing, just
no melodies, just beats.
No melodies, absolutely zero melodies, just beats and beats as fast as you could play them. Literally, that was all I wanted to do was just play stuff as fast and as hard as I could. And I do
recall that. I recall that of you very much.
I had the school teacher who was very the opposite of what I was going for. She was very much, sit in a chair and play rudiments very delicately, and which, now I look back on that and I'm like, I wish I had learnt those things, because it actually unlocks loads of really amazing stuff down the line. But at the time, I was like, "This is so boring," and I just
at the time you just don't want to know about that shit when you're learning an instrument. Just like, get me to the beats right now.
Yeah, literally. And I remember I think we did about 6, maybe like I have no idea how long, maybe 3 months, 6 months. We did a certain amount of lessons, and she did a little appraisal of how I'd been getting on, and I was shocked because I felt like I was doing quite well. And she was like, I'll never forget it. She was like, "You do not have the patience to make a what did she say? Successful or I think convincing drummer beyond the level of a pub band." Because
my God.
Due to lack of attention to detail and attention span. And I was like,
"Oh, I love it."
Okay.
Did that fuel you? At all? Like, it must have done. You must have been like, "Fuck you, I'm doing this."
I definitely was a bit like that, because we just were so obviously going for different things. Ironically, I think over the years, from listening to music that I already liked from drummers that had learned, properly, I probably picked up a load of the stuff that she was trying to teach me at the time. But I got there in a way that I found not just crushingly boring. And, I think I've never been diagnosed officially, but I'm pretty certain there was an element of ADHD when I was growing up, and just not being able to pay attention to, I couldn't sit there and do doubles on a practice pad for 15 minutes. I would be doing all kinds of stuff just because my mind would get bored and then it would move on to something else. It's funny. I think it's like school, isn't it? It's one of those things that a lot of the time you're in school at an age where you don't really want to be learning. If you could just go and make a few mistakes, live a bit of your life, and come back 10 years later. Like I barely went to sixth form. I just didn't really go to school.
You were at sixth form at our school, but I just never saw you. You were always in Oxford. Just you had a girlfriend in Oxford, you had a band in Oxford, you were gone.
Yeah, I was out of there. But, had my life not gone in a sort of creative musical direction, I might be absolutely fucked, because I basically didn't take any exams. Like, I didn't get any qualifications. Like, they'd be like, "What do you get at school?" I'd be like, "Don't know,"
just to like an empty piece of paper that said "Will return one day."
Yeah,
you should go back.
I feel like we could do
like Drew Barrymore, never being kissed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. So you did the school lessons. I also did the school lessons for piano. I was already playing guitar. I did school lessons for piano, and I always forgot they were on because you had to leave during a class to go to them. If I remember, for the ones I was doing, did you have to do that as well?
No, I don't think so. I feel like mine were
was it like after school?
Yeah, I think so.
My ones were weird. It was like during school, and I just always forgot to go, and I just didn't get anywhere with it. Like it was just a waste of time. But so you did the school lessons. They admonished you for your lack of talent, so you'll never make it beyond a pub band. I love that. So obviously you must have gone. Did you go and get lessons somewhere else, and then started to let's skip to when was your first band? When did you start playing with other people?
So yeah, after those lessons, I didn't get lessons again. At that point, I just practiced a lot at home. I did have a kit in my room, so I was able to sort of play.
Did you have the pillows? Did you have the net skins, or
No,
did you just annoy your parents?
Yeah, it was full loud. It was so loud actually that I guess I started playing at 14. I think by 18 I'd been sort of shut down. Like the neighbours had complained. I think at that point I moved into like electronic pads and that kind of thing. But I hated it because I didn't get the same sort of like energy release from the pads. It doesn't feel as cathartic, I guess. But yeah, so I practiced at home, and I think my first ever band was with Chris Marsh and Ed Bates.
Two friends of mine and of yours.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't spoken to them in years, but
Yeah,
guys who we hung out with at school.
yeah. And then I'm not even really sure how long that lasted for, but not that long. And then I started a band with two other guys from school. Welcome to the Doll's House with Simon.
I remember
Davies
that.
And
Simon Chapman, was it?
Simon Chapman, and I think Travis was in there for a while. William Travis. That also probably it's weird with teenage memories because time now goes so quickly, but at the time things didn't move as fast, and we could have been in that band for 2 weeks or 2 years. I can't really remember.
Yeah, it's true. It makes an impression, but it could have been nothing. It could have been just a conversation that you had.
Yeah.
Or maybe people got together. I definitely came to your house once or twice to play music and ended up playing Dreamcast. Probably more of the practice was spent playing Shenmue on your Dreamcast.
Well, and likewise, I remember going to Christian's house and playing drums in his room,
in the basement room.
In the basement room. So yeah, there was a lot of that, but none of those bands I made it to have a gig. I think when I joined my punk band Car Bomb Dating, that is when
Car Bomb Dating.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really fun period. Because that was the first time I think I got really excited about being in a band. I think more so just because I think we were all simultaneously getting into the same kind of music and got really excited about it. And I guess it just felt more, I guess maybe it was a bit older, but it felt more accomplished and more kind of, listening back to some of the recordings now, I'm like, it can't have sounded that bad in the room. I think we just did a really bad job of recording it. But because of the era that we were in at the time, like there's barely any documentation, like nothing, because people had stopped taking film photos and digital hadn't really taken over. So there's a whole period from our age group's youth, which just there's barely any documentation. There's no videos, which is
You're
a real
so right.
shame.
Pre-social media, but like post keeping things. Like we didn't see the value in keeping hard copy stuff. I've got a few bits. I've got stuff from Headroom. With I've got a little box of things, some old clippings, reviews, and like things like that. Which is I think my mum mostly kept.
Yeah.
Bless her, because she was our roadie. Hence the name of the podcast. She likes to say tour manager, but it doesn't work as well for the name. But yeah, we were just in this weird grey area for music where it was really transitional and like downloads just kind of starting to be thought about. And so, okay, Car Bomb Dating, this is definitely the first band. I remember this band well. And by the way, to all the listeners, not every guest is going to be someone I went to school with and someone who I played music with. But in this case, it's just a great first guest for us. But I remember Car Bomb Dating. So give us a little rundown of that band. Like what kind of style? How would you describe the style and the influences of that band?
Okay, so I guess what we were going for was kind of like the 90s iteration of sort of California punk, I guess. Our favourite bands were like Lagwagon, NoFX, Strung Out, Propagandy, All of basically a lot of Fat Records and Epitaph stuff.
Yeah,
and
the Punkaramas,
exactly
Survival
short
of the
music
Fattest.
For short people. All of
Oh
that.
yeah. Brilliant albums, by the way. I loved those. They're still good now. They're really great, those compilations.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think there was also some sort of first wave kind of emo stuff in there, like Waxwing and Small Brown Bike and Sunny Day Real Estate and that kind of thing, and American football. So it actually, looking back on it, that was not. I feel like that's a period of music that's aged kind of well. Like I like a lot of that music still, and it doesn't feel gross. And to be honest, actually, I don't feel like that really about any music, because especially now that sort of new metal's doing the rounds again, it's kind of interesting listening back to it in a sort of almost like a sort of trendier lens.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like I know, I've got a lot of younger friends who are in their mid-20s or younger, and they're really into that kind of the fashion, the music, everything like that, and it's funny because I guess they do remember it, so some of them barely do. I heard something. I was speaking to a French person the other day, and they said the early 2000s is now vintage. And I said, well, yeah, I guess, but the 70s is vintage, the 80s is vintage. It's like, no, vintage, right? Van is 20, age is age. So vintage is for wine is because like usually 20 years is about the amount of time that makes it a vintage wine. So 20 years on, something becomes vintage, and that's when we start hearing it in this way. It's like, okay, it's sweetened, it's become right, and we can look back on it. I was blown away by that. That was brilliant bit of language stuff, right?
I've never knew that.
But you're right. The punk stuff I think you've been able to go back to it sooner. Like the whole time I've been kind of going back to that kind of punk stuff here and there, and it's always been like listenable and fun. And so you were into the punk stuff, the Epitaph, the West Coast kind of punk stuff. How did you meet these guys? Fergus, Alex Keeley, Brendan, and it was just the four of us. Basically, they were Oxford guys, right? Or were they from Oxford, or they went to school in Oxford?
So they all went to school in Oxford, but Keeley lived in Tame. So that's how I met them. It was Tame Fair, the usual September kind of night out. And I'd been out
Tame
for
Fair.
I know, what an amazing institution that is Tame Fair.
I'm just going to cut in and say quickly, in the UK, every town, the fair comes to town. There's rides, there's games, there's carnies, there's the whole thing. And in Tame, it came in the middle of September, just towards the end of September, when school had kind of just started. And we also had a day off for the agricultural show, for Tame Show. So everybody would go to the fair on this Thursday where we had off school. It was this huge thing. It took over the middle of our tiny market town, and it was this big event every year.
It was amazing.
Where the kids could just go fucking wild.
Yeah. And that's how I met the guys. Basically, I remember I'd spilt like WKD Blue or Smell of Ice all over myself, and I had to borrow a black and red jumper off a girl I knew that was about 2 sizes too small. So I'm wearing a skin tight black and red sort of Dennis the Menace jumper, and
amazing.
I think the Smell of Ices that didn't spill down my top had all landed in my mouth. So I was staggering all over the place, and I fell over the wall outside the Tame War Memorial, and these 3 kids came over and sort of picked me up off the floor and were like, "You all right, mate?" And I don't remember how it got from that to the band being formed, but I think it was a situation as well where they'd already got a drummer, and I think they asked me to do it before they'd gotten rid of the old drummer. And that's kind of happened a couple of times, and it's very awkward because it's like
it's happened to you a few times, has it?
Well, yeah, there's been a couple of instances where someone has been like, "Would you like to join the band?" and they've already got someone. But kids are ruthless. We were literally. Yeah. I think I was 15 at the time, or maybe 16. And so I just joined this band, and we set up in this like playroom at my friend's house, and we just had this routine of we'd come home. They all went to the same school. I didn't. I went to the same school as you. We'd come home, they'd have dinner. It's still in their school uniforms, and then we'd just play for like 4 hours. And then we'd just go out and get really, really drunk. And I'd sleep on like the floor in their house and get up and push trolleys around a hot car park at Waitrose.
Oh, you worked at Waitrose, trolley boy.
Yeah, I was the trolley boy.
Amazing.
That's the only job I've ever had in my life.
Being a ginger trolley boy at Waitrose in the early 2000s was I mean, you've come up a long way from them, out there getting sunburned, just pushing trolleys around. They've got a machine to do it now. I saw a guy at Asda with the whole machine, and you had to do it by hand back in those days.
Honestly, I mean, that job, my dad basically on my 16th birthday was like, "Here you go. I've got you a job interview for Waitrose," and they gave me the job. I was almost deliberately trying to sabotage my interview, and when I did eventually like get ready to go to uni, I was falling out with my bosses and stuff. Like I hated it there, and I sort of acrimoniously left. Like wrote a sort of letter of notice that was literally just like, "Dear whoever, don't want to do this anymore. Here's my 2 weeks notice, Jack." Anyway, went to uni.
That's punk.
Yeah. But then I realised I didn't have any money, and after I came back for Christmas from uni, I was just like, well, I have to go back to Waitrose. So I came back, and the person who sort of accepted my letter of resignation before, quitting, they were like, "Oh yeah, we've got some special jobs for you now that you're back from London." Yeah, back from London. I was like, "Okay, what's that?" They were like, "All right, so we've got these biological waste bags in the freezer section, and what we need you to do is if you can go up through this hatch in the roof, just onto the roof. There's been a lot of birds have been dying on the roof because of bird flu recently. So if you could just scoop them into one of these biological waste sacks, and we'll dispose of them." And I was just like, "Is that even legal? Do you need training to be handling?" I remember scooping up a dead pigeon, and its head just fell off. Like I wasn't supporting it. The head actually just fell off the body.
Oh my god, bird flu.
Yeah,
I love.
Well, that puts a date stamp on it, doesn't it?
It does. That's exactly right. And I love the bitterness of like, "So you're back from London, are you?
Yeah.
We've got some jobs for you, London boy."
Yeah.
"Sweep the chimneys, you little bastard."
Yeah, literally.
Oh man, that is hilarious. Yeah, I worked at Waitrose, did my time, did Asda, did a few others. Rough stuff. But I love that. So you're practicing in the playroom. We had as you probably know, we have the luxury in Headroom, my band. Our drummer's dad was a musician, and he had a studio in the garden, which, I mean, studio, it was a real brick building in the garden, I guess. Yeah. It was with some really old amps, that kind of vibe, and some headphones that looked like they were made by Thomas Edison. So we were the lucky ones. We had it all. But my brother Max's band practiced in our living room for quite a while. But so you got together, car bomb dating. You met the guys, and what was your first? I want to know your first gig. I also do want to know if you remember any of your song titles. But let's definitely gear towards the first gig. Okay,
so. Well, the first gig actually was a Chinna Rock Night, and it was not just a Chinna Rock Night. It was a battle of the bands at Chinna.
Did we do a battle of the bands at Chinna Rock Night?
Yeah. So that was the first.
I just want to before you get into it again, I want to explain to anyone listening. back in this time, we used to play a lot of gigs in village halls. That was when you were young. That's what you did. They were everywhere, all over the country, as far as I'm aware. That's one of the things I'm trying to bring together in this podcast is find out about village hall gigs, because I love the idea of them. To me, it's just hilarious and interesting and heartwarming. So in Chinna, we had the Chinna Village Hall. Our drummer's mum, Michelle, she ran this gig, and it was like a £5 entry, and you'd see like 4 or 5 teenage bands, young bands, maybe a headliner who were a bit older, a bit more established, but everyone was really local, and it was just absolute carnage every time. Alka-Pops, cheap blocky, smoking the hash out the back, anything goes, fingering, whatever. So this was the kind of atmosphere we're looking at. So yeah, so the Battle of the Bands, do you remember anything about like the prize or like who was involved?
Well, I remember, obviously, because we were playing punk music, our songs were quite short and they were all really fast. And I remember that we had a 15-minute slot at this Battle of the Bands to play our first gig. And we played 15 songs. So we literally just played 1 minute long songs. I'm pretty sure that one of our friends was dressed up in a dinosaur costume and was just like the vibe of the sort of early noughties kind of more pop.
Mighty Boss Tones had someone, didn't they? An extra person.
Yeah, just sort of dancing. So I think that was at that gig. And actually, thinking back to those kind of gigs, the village hall ones, it sort of spoilt me in a way for what was to come after that. In the sort of community gigs where everyone from a friendship group in an area goes to, those gigs were all sold out. They were all like 200 people, 300 people, however many could fit, however many people were allowed to go. They were always full, and the vibes were amazing. It was only down the line when I was playing in sort of up later bands where we were playing gigs where that community spirit hadn't sort of spread to, and it was we were just in a niche band that people didn't necessarily know about, and then that's when you started playing to sort of 5 or 10 people, at a gig. I think my idea of what a gig was just this amazing, like, sort of joyous thing with all your mates, and a lot of family, and just that, like, kind of the perfect version of a gig. I guess because I didn't go to many other gigs at the time, that was the norm. So what
you're saying is Jack Bevan, drummer of Foals, he's headlined the Pyramid Stage, Latitude, Bonnaroo, he's toured around the world, opened for Red Hot Chili Peppers, but his favourite gig that really set the tone was the Chinna Rock Nights in Oxfordshire in 2002. Well, that's what I'm hearing.
I know that sounds silly, and I wouldn't necessarily be able to say it was the favourite, but they're definitely some of my favourite gigs because, because they're formative. That's the first time you've ever done something, and in a really nice way. All those other things are amazing, but like, the first time you actually do something, the first time you actually play on stage, especially if you're doing it in a sort of community atmosphere where it does feel busy and vibey, and it's not just really awkward with you and a couple of old mates knocking about. I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, like, so much of it when once you get down to the business of it, it becomes your job. It's still great. I don't have that much experience from the musical side, but like, certainly, working as a comedian, even at the level that I am now, you're approaching it as a job. But the first times that you get on stage when you're young and you do, especially music, and like you say, there's people always impressed, even if they kind of don't like it. They're impressed that you were getting up there at 16 and playing songs, and your friends are like, "Oh man, they're in a band!" Like, and you look back and it was raucous and it was out of time and it was completely misguided. But it's there's something about that which is great. I mean, it's before you ever think about getting paid or wondering about whether you're going to make a living or you're going to, organize shit. That's the main thing everyone wants to do, is to do that gig on that Saturday. That's all anyone's thinking about for the month beforehand, which is nice.
Yeah.
Compared to like, oh fuck, I've got to play the Hammersmith Apollo. Can't be asked. So that was the first. Did you win the Battle of the Bands? I'm going to assume not. I can't remember the result.
No, we didn't. I can't actually remember who did. Genuinely, it's not a bruised ego though. I genuinely can't remember who did win.
They're some twats. Some piece of shit.
But I feel like, and I might be wrong, I feel like you guys kind of played a sort of a headline set aside from the. I feel like you guys played as well, but weren't part of the battle.
Too good to compete. Just above it, really.
Yeah, just like Eurovision, you weren't allowed to enter because it would have been unfair.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Ireland at the Eurovision or whatever. So that was the first one of many, quite a few Chinna Rock nights we definitely played with you. How far afield did you get with Car Bomb Dating? Like, I assume you started like playing more gigs and doing kind of that kind of thing. Are there any things that stood out for you? Any trips that you did or any particular places you played?
We did a few gigs outside of the Rock Nights. We did Oxford Punk Fest at the Bullingdon Arms in Oxford.
Was it an all-dayer?
It was an all-dayer.
Whoa, I love an all-dayer.
We played with a band called Left Front Tire, who were on the American Pie 2 soundtrack, I believe. And to us at that time, even though we'd never heard them before or since, like that was the most impressive thing I'd ever seen was a band from America playing in Oxford. And I remember making probably like the ultimate backhanded compliment that you can make to a band, but doing it in a completely naive way, where I was just, I met the drummer and I was like, man, you were so tight. And the guy was like, yeah, of course I'm tight. It's what I've been doing for like the last 10 years. And I was just like, oh yeah, well, just really was tight.
That's so true.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I think, when you spend a lot of time touring, there are certain compliments you can give to someone and receive and know that that's code for I don't like your band, and that is either that you were so tight or man, like the show looked amazing, or like the lights, it just looked incredible.
The lighting was just perfect.
Yeah, and I feel like by saying this to Mike, I've probably shafted myself for the future, because it's the sort of thing I've probably said so many times because I haven't liked something. I don't know.
Well, when you're new, like that's the thing that people say to you, and you don't know that it's a backhanded compliment because that's all anyone ever says because your band sucks. But if you were, that's what people always said to us. I was like, yeah, we're fucking tight. Thanks a lot. I loved it.
Yeah,
I didn't even. It's like when you do comedy, people come and like, oh, so brave. I couldn't do what you do. Yeah, I couldn't do what you do. Really amazing that you get up there. Like, all right, so I bombed. Thanks a lot. That's amazing. So yeah, those punk all-dayers, man. I mean, those were just classic. And you're like, what was everyone doing? And there was never anyone in the venue because people were walking around, smoking in and out, going out and doing drugs and getting booze from the off license. And there was only ever like 3 people in the room while you were on. Ever. That was it.
No, it was exactly that vibe. And looking back on it, because of the type of music we played. And because I was like, nervous to play shows, I don't know why we decided to do this, but in order to have as much energy as possible to play our fast songs, we didn't drink any alcohol before the show at all. We got a pot of like Kenko or whatever instant coffee, emptied about a quarter of it out, and then just poured enough hot water in to make a sludge. And then we'd just be like spooning this sort of like pure coffee. We used to call it a super coffee to just give us all this like caffeinated energy to just get on stage and say like, And yeah, no wonder we were bloody nervous. Like, honestly, I must have had the equivalent of about 14 cups of coffee before every single gig.
Yeah. And when you were like a kid as well, like I didn't
Yeah.
even drink coffee until I was like in my 20s. I love it now, but like that is savage. Absolute savage behaviour. Very responsible of you though, not to drink alcohol before the show.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I don't think I made the connection at that age that it sort of can chill you out a little bit, I think. At the time, you know, when you're a kid, I guess you just see, or at least I definitely as a teenager, just saw as booze as this thing that you did like on a Friday and Saturday night to get out of your mind. And it would be like you'd get some guy to go down Unwin's to buy you a bottle of Strongbow or whatever, then hang out in the wreck until 3 o'clock in the morning and sort of fall asleep in your shed next to Simon Chapman.
Yeah, I guess you're like, oh, that's going to tire me out, but actually you're just tired from just being a lunatic like kid and being out till whatever time in the morning, like outside doing nutty stuff. We were just always stoned when we played, so like it was pretty much the opposite, but they weren't very fast songs. Who were the other bands around? So were there any bands that stuck out to you either in Tame locally? Obviously there was Headroom that I was in. We knew each other pretty well. Were there any other bands there, or any bands in Oxford that you looked up to, or?
Well, actually, I do remember. I'm not sure if it was at Battle of the Bands, but I think it was one of the normal rock nights in Chinner. I'm sure you remember because I talked about it a few times over the years. That band Last Out. Yeah, and they were just so proficient. Like amazing players just playing the kind of music that we were trying to make. And I just remember being so blown away by it. And I feel like I looked up a couple of the guys in the band a few years ago, and I think I found them and they were doing music somewhere, but I've basically found no way of sort of like finding them on social media. I'd love to know if they still make music in some capacity, or if, you know, they're doing something, because, you know, they were like 16 years old and playing like amazing, like really technical music.
I remember seeing them and being absolutely just blown away. I'm just on the computer now. So they were different. They weren't the same as Skirtbox, were they?
No.
Skirtbox were another band who were similar, and they would gig together and stuff, right? And they were from the same. Yeah. High Wycombe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were Wycombe, and I think Last Out was sort of maybe like Risborough, Wycombe-y kind of area as well.
And Skirtbox became Jet Black.
Oh,
did you know that?
No.
They went from being tech punk to being like heavy metal. They kind of like they kind of delved down the techie route until they were a retro hard metal, hard rock kind of Megadeth-y band.
I can see how that transitions, to be fair.
Yeah, like it was oh yeah, we're doing punk, but then we're gonna add a bit of guitar. Oh, we're gonna add more. Okay, now we're not. The punk's gone. The way you're repeating the kind of punk to hardcore to heavy metal 70s 80s trajectory, aren't you? Really?
Yeah.
Just within one band. Yeah, I have no idea where Last Out ended up, but I remember them well, and it was like, whoa, these kids are sick.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't know how you would see them now. Like if I went to a gig and watched a bunch of 16-year-olds play that kind of music now, I don't know if I'd be as impressed, but at the time it was like
you know, completely. Yeah,
and you want to be better, right? You're like, we've got to be better than these guys somehow.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely, I don't know, I think there's sort of, especially when you're in your early teens and mid-teens, I think, you know, I think a lot of people that get into bands are kind of outcasts in one way or another at school, and then you form this little pack with your mates where you all like the same things, and it does give you a sort of kind of pack mentality, which kind of, you know, leads you to be kind of competitive in some ways, like, you know. Mm-hmm. But I remember seeing Last Out though and just being like, well, there's just nothing we can do about this. These guys are just so much better than us.
That is the other way. There's two ways your mind goes. One is, we're just quitting. We're just going to stop because this is not possible.
Yeah.
But then, you again, it's like looking at all of these things that come along, the drum teacher telling you you're never going to make it, and then, the punk all days and all these things, and then seeing this band, like, fuck, I'm never going to be able to do this. And now, obviously you've had this amazing career. It's so sad because I've Googled Last Out and I've Last Out punk band and all that stuff. And I've done this before with that same band and tried to find them, and there's nothing.
Yeah.
So until I find someone, exactly, if someone's listening to this who's from Wickham or Risborough, who knows them or can vouch for anyone from that network, that's what we want to find. We want to find these people. Next stop, what else? So how long was the band together roughly?
So if I remember correctly, I think it was probably together about 2 years, and I think we ended up breaking up because I think the other guys were all at Magdalen, which is actually where Yiannis from now Foals was at school as well, and it's a much more serious school than, well, it's not that it's a more serious school, but you would have got kicked out of Magdalen if you behaved like me. So like I wouldn't have been allowed in that school. So I think it essentially broke up because they needed to take loads of time off to do their exams. Nobody
gave a shit about Lord Bill, so it was like, well, yeah, we do have an exam, but we'll turn up and we'll guess, we'll piss off.
Yeah, so that's basically what kind of happened, and I was like, well, when I was a teenager, all I really enjoyed was skateboarding and drumming. So I was kind of like, I'd already, like school, I was just kind of, I don't know, I just didn't have the attention for it, especially after GCSEs, because I think I was relatively, like, just naturally quite good at school until A-levels, and then it got kind of hard, and I didn't feel like I wanted to have the attention to invest in it. So I was kind of like, well, I'm just going to do more drumming and more skateboarding. And also I applied to art college quite early on and got an unconditional offer to go there. So I knew that I didn't.
Where'd you go?
Oxford Brookes in the end to do art foundation. But I think I needed two U's or 2 E's to get into art college. So
2 U's, just to show that you exist as a person.
Just to show that I wasn't kicked off before I failed.
Surely E's.
It must be an E's, but it was low. It was low enough that I knew that I could probably just go in and just take the test without having been to any of the classes or
you turn up, you're like, look, I got my 2 E's in my exams. They're like, no, ecstasy. We wanted you to bring 2 pills to get you started.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I was kind of like, I don't want to take a break now. I felt like I was really enjoying this band stuff. So I posted an advert on oxfordbands.com, which used to be a bit of a hub back in the day for.
I remember it well.
There was a message board, which I feel like got fairly heated back in the day. With sort of, people, there was a few people in Oxford especially that used to argue amongst each other on that particular website. But I posted my my advert, and it basically said, drummer who likes Boards of Canada, Aphex Twin, Don Caballero, and a few other bits and bobs, looking for band. And
from an ad that pretentious, it could only be one person.
Well, and as fate would have it, Yiannis sent me a message back, and then actually posted me a letter, which I wish I could remember what was on it, but it was basically like, here's my phone number. I've made a tape. He basically made a tape the old school way, where you actually have to have a 2 tape deck and play one into the other and record it. And annoyingly, that would have been my sort of favourite Foals relic. But it got lost somewhere, so I have no idea where it is. But But anyway, so he was like...
That would be worth something to some fans if you had the original. Was it a tape of him playing, or was it like songs that were ideas, things that we would like?
Yeah, it was more of just a tape of influences. I think there might have been some Elizabeth, which was the previous band, and some early Edmund Fitzgerald stuff before I joined on there.
Before you replaced the existing drummer, like you always do, you parasite.
Well, yeah. So anyway, I remember meeting Yiannis at PMT. This was in a time before mobiles. He didn't.
I used to work at PMT.
Did you?
I did, probably around that time, if not a little bit after or before.
Nice. I remember when I met him, he didn't have a phone, and I did.
Right.
So it was a case of like,
which was not weird at the time.
Some
people didn't have phones. That was normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely frustrating if you go all the way to Oxford from Tame to meet someone and they're late and you've waited half an hour and don't realise that they're running 40 minutes late, and then you just give up and go home. That happened.
Is that what happened?
That had happened a few times in that era, but more often than not, it worked. But anyway, we went to PMT, and basically we walked all the way down the Cowley Road up to a house that Youth Movies used to live in, a band that at this point I didn't know, but was... sorry, Siri's trying to...
You're just getting directions down the Cowley Road from Siri.
Yeah, thanks Siri. About 20 years too late, but still. So anyway, we go around to this house and there's a drum kit set up, and this is one of the things where, in retrospect, I just love and wish you could sort of bottle that sort of fearlessness that you have when you're a teenager, where now, if I was going to walk into a situation like this, I'd be so nervous. But I remember just going in, and then there's a kit set up, to someone else's sizes, dimensions and stuff. And Yiannis was just like, yeah, well, just show me like what drums like you can do, And I was just like, okay. So I just sort of sat down and just started bashing away. And he seemed to think it would fit the bill. So that was kind of the start of me joining the Edmund Fitzgerald, which had been going for a year or so before then.
Yes, the Edmund Fitzgerald, previously Elizabeth, right? And then would eventually, you and Yiannis would change, and it would have kind of become Foals.
Yeah.
Not that far down the line, kind of.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm going to do? Because we're at 50 minutes. I am going to take this opportunity, first of all, to invite you back on the show later on. Would you like to do the show again in a few months or years and talk about this period at some point?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Assuming that it doesn't go out and everyone goes, this is the worst podcast, we're not going to allow this to be on. But I would love, because I feel like we could talk for like 3 or 4 hours, but I think that I'm not quite at the level where I'm not Joe Rogan. I can't just put out a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. So what we'll do is we'll just, we'll clean off with a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned oxfordbands.com. They used to do interviews on oxfordbands.com.
Yeah.
And the questions were, one of the questions was, were you a drug band, a booze band, or a food band?
Oh.
So about Car Bomb Dating specifically, your first band that you were in, were you drug, food, or booze band?
I would say probably mostly a food band at that time, because of our sort of pre-rehearsal dinners, and considering that we were so young. Yeah, I'll go with food for Car Bomb Dating.
Going with food, okay. Who was, off the top of your head, a favourite or a classic local band that perhaps we can look at talking about in the future? Someone who just pops in your head who you haven't mentioned yet today.
Yeah, well, there is Co Mackay, who you've played some shows with as well. Who coincidentally, and I'll probably might be able to talk about this in the next episode if we do one. I'm friends with one of the members of that band now, in sort of later life. So I think there'd be an interesting.
This is the one with the ripped torso who you got jealous of, who inspired you to call the personal trainer.
Exactly, this is the one.
Okay. Yes. And perhaps we can work out some, because I remember Komakai well, classic new metal kind of band of the time in Oxford and in the area, who were kind of on the verge of something, didn't quite do it. Maybe I think we're talking about maybe getting in. I'm going to try and get in contact with this guy. What's his name?
Steve Durham.
Okay.
So he was
see if
the
we
drummer.
can get that hooked up.
And
for an
the
episode.
other one, which I really do think, I mean, I'm sure you've already thought about this, is Shouting Mike. Obviously, that was a band that
Shouting Mike.
That I think they went on. They became another band who did quite well.
They were called something like
a silent film.
A silent film. That's exactly right.
And I've met the singer a few times in the last, well, probably not for 10 years or so, but I bumped into him a few times over the years since that era.
I have to speak to that guy. I have to speak to someone from them, because that was our version of Last Out. We played with them in the Bullingdon Arms in Oxford, and it was in the back room. It was fuck all people there. It was on a Thursday or something. And they were sound checking, and it was just like everything about them was just levels up from us. They had big, massive amps, really nice drum kit. All the covers were on the drum kit, like all the rings were there in the right place. There wasn't like a random pillow showing in the middle of the drum kit. Like they didn't have broken shit and stickers on their guitars. They were like 2 years older than us. They seemed like they were like in their 20s or 30s. They weren't, but they just had like facial hair and were like, and they just sounded like Deftones at the time before they went pop. Emo. They sounded like Deftones originally, and it was incredible. And we were just like, this is, and it just changed really where we were going with the Headroom. Yes, classic. And you can listen to Shouting Mike. If anybody's listening to this and wants to listen along, I will attempt to put on some playlists and stuff like that and links, but there are Shouting Mike tunes available to hear online.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, Shouting Mike is there. So that's a good one. We'll do that. We'll talk about Strobe 45 one day too.
Yes.
But we can't get into that because that's a whole other thing. But we'll talk about that another time. I would love to have you back on at some point, mate, if you can make it. I know you're busy and you've got touring and everything, but thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything else that you've got in your mind that you wanted to tell, stories or anything like that? You can say no if you want, but is there anything else you wanted to just kind of say about any of this? Whatever it is.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, you know, talking about this era that, I could waffle on for honestly hours about it because it was such a formative period. But no, I think it's a really nice thing in this podcast to be looking at those, whether it's, you know, other people's versions of this. But I think there's something quite unique about this. Is a thing that happens in smaller towns away from suburban towns, market towns, because in cities you have, you know, your more normal venues that bigger bands play at, but because those don't really exist in your Thames, your, you know, sort of outside of Reading and, you know, all of these places that a lot of people grow up, you have to make your own. And I think, you know, that in itself is really exciting. And it's once you get to a certain level, then places in like Oxford will book you, or London eventually will book you. And I think it's I'd be really interested to know how much of this is going on now, and if it is going on as much, you know, with the village halls and, you know, that kind of thing.
This is just what I was thinking is, does this happen now? Are the kids doing this now? Obviously, things have changed so much. Social media has changed everything. Because this is something that you can't quite get. You know, you can put up TikTok videos as much as you like, but like this experience that we've had we did. It was a particular time because we had some technology and we had access to instruments, and a lot. They had all this different music that we could access, like LimeWire and all that. Really changed things because you could get music from anywhere. I had a whole smorgasbord of different things that I was listening to. It wasn't just the punks, the metalheads, the trance people. We saw that part disappear where everybody had their tribe, and it started to meld into one, and people were trying different things. It was a real special time that's not recorded. And like you say, that those bands didn't get big because the bands in the cities, their parents had money and they could see people doing well and they could see the pathway to it. We just had village halls, pay-to-play gigs in London, which we will talk about. We will talk about pay-to-play gigs at the Camden, the Dublin Castle, the Water Rats, the Monto Water Rats. We're going to talk about all of those. But yeah, we definitely want to find that out. That's brilliant. We're just coming up to an hour. Thank you, Jack Bevan, for being on the podcast. Please like and subscribe and share and review. And we will be back next week. Fingers crossed our next guest will be comedian Josh Weller, who has a great history of being in bands. And just want to say thank you to Jack. Thanks for coming on, my friend.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. It's been lovely.
All right. That's it. My mum was our roadie. Take care.